Alrighty, do I have access to my mouse? I do not. Unfortunate. Okay, just scroll down a little bit. Alrighty, that is Mass Effect 3 Conquered. Heck yeah. This game was about as enjoyable as I remember it being. You know, I enjoyed it a lot. That's basically my overall thoughts on it. Is the journey up until the end is pretty good, and kind of reliving that particular ending, I think that ending is better than I thought it was gonna be. I should reduce the volume on that because it's a little loud. Story, was it satisfying? I think it was actually satisfying. I enjoyed it quite a bit. You know, I enjoyed it. Did it feel complete? It does feel complete, at least with the ending that I chose. Again, you know, I have a fairly vague memory of the endings, so I knew that one was gonna be, you know, like the best. Freddie Prinze Jr.? Did they spell his name wrong? Is Prince spelled with a Z? Interesting. But yeah, I had a vague idea. I think, again, the green ending just seems kind of risky, but it very clearly is outlined as the best ending. You know, even the little kid is like, you know, it's inevitable that we reach that point. You just make it go faster. How was the pacing? I think the pacing was okay. You know, I did nearly every single side quest, so there's that. Thoughts on the story? I wanna talk about the ending a little bit, because I definitely remember the ending sequence not being, you know, amazing. And part of the reason for that is the introduction of the Catalyst being, you know, like this AI program created by, I guess we just call them the Leviathans, that, you know, kind of control the Reapers. And I do admit that is kind of a uninteresting direction to take. It could have been a little bit more interesting than that. I know that they aren't really setting the Reapers to be bad guys per se. They're just kind of a tool. But I do think it would have been more interesting for Reapers to just be a bunch of bad guys. You know, they see themselves as the arbiters of evolution, and they choose to harvest those who evolve too much. And I think tunneling down that particular route would have been more interesting to me personally. But this wasn't like disappointing or even awful by any standards. I think this ending works quite well, and I think what they did, you know, works decently well. You have to get all the readiness points to earn the green option. Reapers are literally a paperclip optimizer gone wrong. You might be able to say that, yeah. Some of my thoughts on the story. I think they handle the politics fairly well as far as wrapping Shepard into them. Yeah, this game was very political in the sense of you're not It's not like Mass Effect 1 and 2, where you're primarily focused on kind of like getting answers and getting your crew together and solving their problems. This game is very much about war and how to use politics to further progress the war in the direction you want to go. And so that particular narrative switch is different. It's definitely not as interesting as the previous games, but I think they do make it work here. How people are resisting the Reapers is confusing to me. Shepard is the only person to ever kill one, and now there are hundreds, if not thousands of them decimating the galaxy. You'd think the harvesting would be quicker than this. Yeah, I don't know the timeline from when Shepard leaves Earth to when we return for the final battle, but it feels like it's at least a couple of weeks and at most a couple of months. And you would think the Reapers would work faster than that. You know, I don't think it takes that long to wipe out the bulk of an attacking or, you know, a defending force, especially with the amount of destruction and things like that that Reapers have. They just lay waste to anything in their path. So the timeline there seems a little murky, and I think it needs a little work, you know, a little bit more answers as to how we're actually putting up a fight. Because as you could see, there's been several instances where we weren't able to put up any sort of fight whatsoever.
Did that all really happen?
Yes, but some of the details have been lost in time. It all happened so very long ago.
When can I go to the stars?
One day, my sweet.
What will be there?
Anything you can imagine. Our galaxy has billions of stars. Each of those stars could have many worlds. Every world could be home to a different form of life. And every life is a special story of its own.
I don't know if you
Tell
can
me another story about the Shepard.
hear him or not.
It's getting late, but okay. One more story.
So I cut the volume in half, basically. Okay. I didn't do that. It was at like 4 something. Go 4.8. That sounds great. Okay. I was talking about that. Less than a year from arrival to Earth. Seems like 9 months-ish. You think they were focused on getting to Earth. What they don't explain is why they got locked in London, or locked into London, out of all places in the galaxy. Well, they did briefly mention that was like one of the first places that the Reapers attacked, and that, you know, like they ended up building a little beam thing up to the Citadel at London. So I think that's why it became kind of like the focal point of the attack. There was something else that I wanted to mention, but I'm forgetting. We'll move on. Udina being a part of Cerberus felt like a massive plot point that didn't hit the mark. As a politician and apparently someone willing to betray, he would have been more prepared. At the very least, try to talk his way out of it. I wish there were clues or a multi-part quest. This part was very sad because the Udina betrayal is a huge deal, you know? And it just turned out to, like, one counselor saying, hey, I think he's betraying us. And Shepard's like, oh my goodness, I'm going to go solve the problem. And there was no subterfuge. There was no kind of back and forth. There was no arguing about it. It was just, yeah, I betrayed you. It was a letdown. It was very disappointing. It could have been so much more. You think it must be from Harbinger getting pissed off at Shepard after Sovereign? Could be that. That's another thing, actually. In Mass Effect 1, there was an amazing scene where Shepard talks to Sovereign, I believe. And that's one of my favorite scenes in all of Mass Effect, because you're talking to this entity that is beyond your comprehension and power. It is essentially like a god, and it is telling you you're going to die and there's nothing you can do about it. It's a very powerful scene, and they never really recreated that scene in any of the other Mass Effect titles 2 and 3. You know, and that in of itself is quite disappointing. Talking to the Reapers and kind of understanding your enemy is a very cool path to take. And you could argue, you know what? You could arguably say that Mass Effect 3's enemy wasn't the Reapers. It was Cerberus, or it was the random mooks of the Reapers, you know, like the grunts. You could say it was all the political factions, but it's very difficult to actually, it's very difficult to see the actual Reapers being our enemy, because we don't interact with the Reapers hardly at all on a conversational basis, on a basis that feels like we need to understand them more. I think that's a missed opportunity that I wish would happen, because they did such a good job introducing the Reapers in Mass Effect 1, and that does kind of fall off as the series progresses, which, you know, makes a lot of sense, because the narrative style does change between Mass Effect 1 and 2, and then from 2 to 3. And the narrative change from 1 to 3 is a pretty large gap. In line with the last Udina plot, a lot of major plot points don't seem to get enough spotlight. The Illusive Man experimenting on his people, the Illusive Man wanting to control the Reapers, Udina being a Cerberus spy. This is another one where I think wanting to control the Reapers is a very interesting way to go about things. And sure, Shepard is probably not going to be too interested in it, but I don't think Shepard would set aside the idea if it's actually a viable option. If you can't destroy the Reapers, then your next step is to control them. You want to have a backup plan just in case. And sure, you know, like the Illusive Man is the Illusive Man, but also at the same time, he did kind of go a little maniacal villain this time around. In Mass Effect 2, he was a very cold and calculating guy, and we got a couple of glimpses of that in this game, but he wasn't on the same level. I think he could have used his resources a little bit better. He could have played Shepard better. He could have done, you know, a large betrayal of sorts. I think that would have been a more interesting angle for the Illusive Man. Yeah. The writing, I thought the writing was pretty good. You know, I enjoyed it quite a bit. After Mass Effect 2, it felt like they were setting up some kind of resolution with Harbinger, but it just gets forgotten. Yeah, we didn't get any interaction with Harbinger whatsoever. I don't even think we get to see Harbinger at all, which is a huge disappointment. I agree with that. For characters, they really did characters dirty in this game. Aside from DLC characters not really getting discussion wheels, returning characters don't seem to get the respect and attention they deserve. Seems like there is less overall banter between Shepard and the crewmates compared to Mass Effect 2. Thane gets relegated to just dying in the hospital, Kasumi being a war asset. Almost every single character gets kind of put by the wayside or put in the background. And as a game that is supposed to be like the end of a saga, you know, you would imagine that every character would be hands on deck for it. And, you know, I understand the technical and financial limitations of this particular task, but you would just think that for the resolution being given, you would just have the options for everybody. You know, you could choose whoever you want. You could imagine a scenario where you have all of your characters from Mass Effect 1 to 3, and you split up into teams, and you're like, I want this team to coordinate this attack. I want this team to coordinate this attack. And then the Shepard team will coordinate this attack. And you're kind of giving out orders as you're going down the line, you know, to attack like a Reaper base or something. It just seems like a huge missed opportunity to bring everybody together and to have this kind of mission, like the Citadel mission that we did, where everybody was together and you were kind of going that should have been the entire game, is you coordinating with your team to accomplish various things and you being able to bring whoever you want that best fits your need. And on top of that, being able to actually interact with those characters and find out what they've been up to, what they're going to do, how they've been, how they're going to affect the war effort, you know, what their strengths are, how they felt about the last mission. All of that stuff was heavily played down, and it's disappointing. You know, a character like Samara who basically has no reason not to join us on the ship, just doesn't join us on the ship. It's strange. That's because they could have all died in Mass Effect 2. It would have been expensive and difficult to work around all the options to deal with that in Mass Effect 3. The only ones they could be sure to have are Joker, Liara, Kaidan, or Ashley. And you get a lot more interaction with them. And then the new people who are also sure to be there. Yeah, again, I'm strictly speaking from the outside of the technical and financial reasons. It would be very, very obnoxious to make that a possibility. But at the same time, there's also situations where maybe you should plan around that. If you're planning to have a trilogy set, maybe just change things up to how people die so that it's not as relevant, or it's not even a factor in the next game, you know? Maybe they die anyways or something like that, etc. If the stakes are high, then just kill off the people like they did with Kaidan or Ashley, and there you go. There's a mock Legion, for example, to do the essential required functional stuff Legion does. But what kind of chit chat would you have with them? Well, I think it would have been really cool after Legion does his Legion thing to come back, or to have a Geth come back on board and serve as like the Geth ambassador. You know, I mean, it's a Geth. Legion is the only interaction and talk we've ever had with the Geth. And now Geth have their own intelligence and their own thoughts. They're their own life forms now. And would that not be interesting to just be able to talk to a Geth about how things are going and what their thoughts are in the current situation and how we could move forward with the war efforts and things like that? I think there's so much potential there for the Geth specifically that, you know, just wasn't tapped into enough. But yeah, I'm disappointed by the usage of characters. I understand the technical and financial limitations. I would just want something more fitting for, you know, like the bid to farewell, you know. It would have just been nicer. Gameplay mechanics and design. What gameplay elements stand out? The UI seems like a step down from Mass Effect 2 in areas like emails or the codex pages. I remarked on this a few times. There's just a lot of menus, a lot of unnecessary menus that are throughout this game that are not really needed. It's just kind of annoying, I guess. To do that, I'm guessing it's a console thing, but you know, like to make consoles more accessible. But on PC, it's just annoying, like to just go through that stuff. It's obnoxious. Even navigating weapons and their upgrades require their own menus. This was obnoxious too. You can't even change your armor on the loadout screen before a mission. Stuff like that just seems like a huge oversight. And you should be able to choose your weapons, upgrade your weapons, modify your weapons, and then change your armor all on the same screen. You know, that doesn't seem very difficult for where I'm standing. But for some reason, it's just not a thing. And as Edge says, spacebar, mutter, mutter. Yeah, the spacebar is a horrible button to bind so many important tasks to. You know what spacebar is good for? Jumping. That's about it. Everything else, get that out of here. You always feel like saving the Geth is one of the main points of the games. Yeah. I think the Geth are super important. It's huge. It's huge. Especially because the Quarians are a bunch of suckafoos. 18 hours into the game, the lack of playable party members compared to past games is incredibly jarring. Yeah, this was really annoying. I had James, I had Liara, I had Garrus, and I think that's it. Then, if you have the DLC, you get Javik. And if you wait a decent chunk of time, you get Ashley. And I think you have 5 characters for like a massive chunk of this game. And if you think back to Mass Effect 2, okay, you have Liara, Tali, Grunt, Grunt, Garrus. I'm forgetting so many people right now. Thane. Yeah, Caden / Ashley. You have Samara. I'm trying not to say the DLC characters yet. I mean, I'm at 7 right now as compared to 3 pre DLC. I think there's like one more that I'm forgetting, but you get the idea. You know, you cut it more than half of the characters available, and then you add DLC characters onto it, and it just makes it worse. You know, it just makes it incredibly worse. So that was a big disappointment for me as well. I wanted more characters. You would think that from Mass Effect 1 to 2, you're like, oh man, I get all my friends to come back and all this. Mordin, forgot about Mordin. Oh man, Mordin. I didn't talk about Mordin, but Mordin is high tier. Um, you would think that the jump from Mass Effect 1 to 2 with all the characters you get, that 2 to 3 would be as I talked about before, you know, just like the penultimate reunion. And it wasn't like that at all. Scanning planets in Mass Effect 2 wasn't fun, but it was on the right track. In Mass Effect 3, they just made it boring. At least in 2, finding that rare bit of Element Zero was a nice moment. The systems felt so easy to improve, and they just threw it out. This was a huge, huge disappointment for me because in order to improve the scanning systems in Mass Effect 2, like the easiest thing I can think of, just make it instant. Flying from planet to planet and like engaging in the narrative of that planet, or you know, the history of it, like that's totally fine. Scanning planets to get resources and spending those resources to upgrade your ship, that's totally fine. But the main issue was scrolling across the entire planet looking for the resources and trying to find them. And when you find them, you send down a probe, which you have to pay for. Like, none of that stuff is interesting. So you just cut all that out. You go to a planet, you hit the scan button, it scans the whole planet, and it's like, hey, we found this, and this. It just seems like a no-brainer to me, you know? It literally seems like a no-brainer to me, and it just didn't happen. I'm sure smarter, intelligent people and game designers out there could think of even greater ways to improve upon that system. But instead, it was just tossed out. And now you just look for like relics and money and things like that. And you scan stuff in the galaxy map. It's a step down for me. It could have been so much more. Weapon weight is the bane of my existence. I don't like it. I'd rather have standard cooldowns. This is an interesting one because, you know, it does open up some interesting possibilities. But I don't think there's anything wrong with letting Commander Shepard use every weapon that he has and just, you know, be good with that. There's nothing wrong with giving Commander Shepard 6 weapons or 5 weapons. The bigger issue there is, how do you cycle through 6 weapons effectively? I feel like that is a big problem. I didn't want 3 weapons because cycling through my shotgun and my assault rifle was already going to be heavily disrupted with a submachine gun added into the mix. So, like, if there was a situation where I'm on a shotgun and I want my sniper rifle out, I'm going to have to be cycling for a time that I don't want to be cycling. There's been multiple instances where, as a Vanguard, I'm charging in, I shotgun a bunch of people, and then I'm out of ammo, and I need to swap or I need to reload. Reloading takes a long time. Swapping to my weapon doesn't take as long. So I want to swap to my assault rifle that, doesn't have ammo, sort of. But like in those situations, what if I wanted to swap to uh something else? I have to cycle through four other weapons to get to the weapon I want to do, and I was dying. The moments where I'm not charging and I'm cycling through weapons or reloading, I'm dying. So it it doesn't seem like a problem to just give you all the weapons. Um, I don't I don't think the power recharge weight dynamic is necessary. I think a more interesting way to go about it could be there. Um, Maybe you could just do it based off of how many weapons you have equipped. Maybe you could just do it based off of what type of armor you have equipped. Maybe you just tie the power recharge bonus to the armor. Speaking of which, I don't think I have it in here, but a transmog system in for the armor. I hope more games implement that because it would have been really nice to have that in this game. But yeah, weight. It wasn't my favorite mechanic. I I was put in a situation where I didn't want to use specific weapons or experiment with other styles of play or other unique sounding weapons because weight was such a significant factor. If weight wasn't there, I would have tried pretty much every single weapon that I picked up and be like, let me see how this works. Let me see how much I like this one. And if I didn't like it, I'd swap it out or whatever. But weight just kind of didn't let me do that. Combat. This being my first time being a Vanguard, it's quite exhilarating ping-ponging into these crazy dangerous situations and just nuking my surroundings. I've only seen a little bit of footage of other people playing Vanguard, and they weren't bouncing around like I were, so it must have been towards the beginning, or maybe they just had crazy amounts of weight or something like that. But holy cow, it must be awful to watch on stream, but it is a hype moment where you're just charging across the map and you're just shockwaving the ground and shotgun and then you charge across the map again. It's so cool. It is so cool. I want to be a Vanguard again because of how cool it is. It's such a unique play style, and it's such a it's so different from every other play style that I'm used to in Mass Effect, especially when I was an engineer at first, that I just can't help but be enthralled by it. I'm indoctrinated of it. Oh yeah, that was actually something that I wanted to mention earlier. There's this crazy fan theory that Commander Shepard is indoctrinated, and that's kind of why he makes some of the choices that he makes. And, going through some fan theories, they're fan theories, so, take that for what it is. But it's a super interesting thought where you go through some of Commander Shepard's decision making and you can kind of see like, oh man, that actually could have been the case. Could have been a little bit more crazy. I think it's a little too subtle. And it seems like the indoctrination process is more heavy-handed, but it's still very interesting. And also, hello, Stellar 141. For dungeons, this has been a complaint of mine for every Mass Effect game. Everywhere you go looks and feels like a set piece for a fight. It makes every location you go to feel less real. This is just something that I wish changed environmentally, with environmental design, I suppose. every object looks like cover. Every object is positioned in a way where it can give you standing cover or crouching cover. It it doesn't look interesting to me when you see it that way. It just seems like you're moving from set piece to set piece instead of a unique environment to unique environment. And I think that's something that could drastically improve in Mass Effect games to come. For miscellaneous sound and music, I like the music when Reapers show up. It's very distinct and creepy. I like the Mass Effect music, but it's very like ambient. It's background music for the most part. So you generally don't hear or get to pay attention too much to the music when there's moments where it's supposed to be, or let me rephrase. There's not a lot of moments where the music is at the forefront. But when you're talking to a Reaper or a Reaper shows up, you know, you hear those horns blaring and all the other good stuff. And, you know, those are some hype moments. The voice acting is top notch as always. Have no issues with the voice acting. I think every voice actor did phenomenally. The graphics have not aged very well in this day and age, and it's been like that for every single Mass Effect game. And you know, there was a small bit of interest in applying a mod to get higher textures and things like that, but I actually like kind of seeing the original look of games sometimes. You know, I want to see what it was when I played it. And sure, it would have been nice to see it all spruced up and whatnot, but I can still appreciate the game for what it looks for, even if it does look muddy and ugly in a variety of places. Replay value. Does the game offer an additional story content on a second playthrough to warrant playing the game again? I don't think so. I mean, you can go through all the additional endings, I suppose. You can make different choices, but you're still doing the same story. Nothing in that regard changes. So I'm going to say no. Nothing replay value there. And the last section, if the developer is watching. I think Mass Effect has gone in a good direction when you think about just these three titles. I'm not talking about any titles after this yet. I think the story of following a singular character, that being Commander Shepard, and, you know, how he's kind of thrown into a situation where, you know, he's kind of responsible for saving the galaxy because he's the most knowledgeable person on being able to do so, is a fun story to be a part of. And I think at the end of the day, Mass Effect 3 does provide a nice conclusion to the Shepard saga or the Shepard story. And I enjoyed it quite a bit. There are definitely improvements or personal tastes that I feel would work better, but I think as a product and whatnot, I think it was very good. Something that I didn't mention is the enemy design in this game is by far the best of any prior Mass Effect game. I had a complaint to Mass Effect 2 that there just weren't enough enemy types. You know, there were Blue Suns, there were Eclipse, and there were Bloodpack. And that was basically all the enemies. And in this game, you have a variety of Reaper forces. You have Cerberus forces, and maybe one or two others that I'm forgetting about. So it was very neat to kind of see the progression that this game made, and And I'm hoping that future Mass Effect games kind of find what makes Mass Effect great and, you know, just further apply those. I really like I really like the Shepard story, and I really like the interaction with your other squad mates. I really like this kind of big galactic threat that is kind of harrowing down on you, and you know, you're just trying to solve it. You're just trying to, you know, find that little crack in the armor that you can exploit. And I enjoyed that a lot. So for future Mass Effect sequels, I just hope you give us more of the same. I hope that the mystery and intrigue is highly developed, and it makes us want to learn more. You don't necessarily have to give us all the answers to make it a fun story. You know, you just have to make sure to conclude the story at hand, which might sound like the same thing, but it's not. Or at least I'm not intending it to sound like that. So that's going to wrap it up for my thoughts. I'm going to find out how obnoxious it is to see the other endings, because if it's not obnoxious, then I'm going to want to watch them. If it is obnoxious, which it's starting to sound like it is, then I'm just not going to do that. So thanks for watching my thoughts. Yeah.